All right, everyone. Welcome once again to the Faces of Business. I am your host, Damon Pistolka, and I am happy, excited, ecstatic because I'm going to be talking to Clayton Stenson here today, none other than the Unity Guide. We're going to be talking about bridging the gap between visionaries and integrators. And if you don't know what we're talking about, you soon will. Clayton, thanks for being here today.
Thank you for having me. I'm looking forward to this.
Oh, it's going to be great, man. It's going to be great. So, Clayton, we're going to be talking about visionaries and integrators, and those of us that don't understand what that is, you're going to be helping us understand that a little bit better. But let's learn a little bit about Clayton. Your history, your background, and how you just decided that you wanted to help people with the EOS system and being a
Yeah.
fractional integrator, and then now helping visionaries and integrators.
hmm Yeah, I'm kind of an unlikely candidate for this, to be honest. I grew up on a farm, 5 generations of farmers on the same farm, 117 years. So you wouldn't have expected that I would end up doing this kind of work. But then through the years, I ended up actually it was at my church was the first time that I was on staff and I was working with a visionary. And to be honest, it was very challenging the first time around. I had no real office experience. I had no experience working with this type of person before. The biggest challenge of it all is that we're very different, right? Like a visionary, maybe I'll just go there quickly.
Mm-hmm.
Visionary, typically, they're a founder. They're typically very good at sales. They're usually really good at ideas, right? They're research and development. Like they like to learn and try to understand, different things and come up with new ideas. They're usually really good at big relationships, solving big problems, but they usually really dislike details and
Yeah.
process and management and all of that kind of thing. Whereas the integrator is the opposite, right? They tend to like details, like process. They like managing people. They like solving the little problems and making systems that will make problems go away. So my first time working with a visionary, we didn't have an integrator type on the team, and so I started off. I'm like, oh, I'm so excited to work with him, and then like 2 weeks in, I'm like, what have I done? Why am I working here? This place is chaos, right? And it
Mm-hmm.
was. I loved the mission. It was a church, and I'm a Christian. I,
Mm-hmm.
uh, love the Lord and all that, but it was very challenging for someone like me who I didn't recognize was an integrator, natural integrator type, but it really bothered me. So then I had to manage my own attitude and be a part of the solution and not a part of the problem. And that wasn't easy, but over 7 years working there, I was able to, to bring some order to the chaos. But yeah, that was kind of how it all got started. Um,
So so you're starting out in this position working with a visionary. What were
mhm.
some of the things that just drove you absolutely crazy?
Well, there was no instructions on how to do anything, right? Like there was no right? There was no job descriptions, there was no processes, there was nothing was written down, right? So it's like, okay, you're in charge of this, go.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, what is this? Like, like what do I do, right? So I had to kind of invent everything from scratch, right? Which is fine, um, if people are motivated and self starters.
Mm-hmm.
You can do that, but I would say that like some people can't, right? And
Yeah.
will wilt and will quit, right? Good thing I'm stubborn, right? Because
Yeah.
I didn't give up, right? And and the other side of visionaries is typically they're very busy, right? So they're hard to corral to ask questions to, right? And they're also um, usually not that aware, right, of how other people feel,
Yeah.
because they're just driven. They're going for it. They got 100 things going on. So it's it's very very challenging, right? Because of that.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, over the years, I kind of learned how to deal with that. I learned how to corral him when I needed to get the answers that I needed. But it was definitely some challenging years there.
Learning too. A lot of learning of it.
Oh yeah, it was an incredible season of learning on a lot of levels, and it's really those 7 years laid the foundation for what I do now, for sure.
Yeah. So when did you first hear about EOS?
Yeah, so it wasn't in those years. I wish
Yeah.
it was. So
Yeah.
I left working there, and I went to work at a construction company, and that was where he mentioned Traction. The book Traction explains what EOS is,
Mm-hmm.
and but I never read it. Right. So, but again, I was working with another visionary. I realized it right away. I'm like, okay, he's very similar to my first, but my initial reaction was, okay, I'm going to treat this differently this time. Right. Like the
Mm-hmm.
first time, to be honest, I was judgmental and critical, of the differences that we had. The second time, I'm like, okay, I'm going to have more grace for him. I'm going to have a stronger voice, when I disagree or when I feel like structure is needed. And it went a lot better. I worked with him. I was an estimator for 3 years. And this is a typical visionary type thing. He promoted me to estimator, and he said, Clayton, I hate spreadsheets and I don't want to learn them.
Yeah.
Can you be my estimator? And my response was, yeah, I can, but I've never estimated before. And I've never done commercial construction before. And he's like, oh, you're smart. You're smart. You'll figure it out and I'll help you. Right. And I was like, okay, well, yeah, let's do it. And it was hard. Like really, I was fortunate. My wife was an architect. So I was able to take like plans home and, ask her questions and, learn how to read plans from her.
Yeah.
To be honest. And anyway, so then over those 3 years that I was in the estimator role, we as an integrator does, we built systems. So I built the spreadsheets. I built, the things to track how many estimates we were sending out, what percentage we were getting, like all that stuff that we never had before. Right. So I just naturally is like, well, we need this. Like, I want to know how we're doing, so I'm going to build spreadsheets that show it. We went from napkin estimating, which, what I call it, it's like, just throwing some numbers at it and hoping for the best, to like an actual system, how to make sure we're doing it right. And then also helped with the transition, right, from estimating to production. So the project manager knows the scope and all that. So anyways, during all those years, he was telling me about Traction. He's like, oh yeah, this book Traction is great. I tried to implement it though, and it didn't really work and all this stuff. And he would vent to me about the things that annoyed him about the business. And then eventually I got sick of him venting to me and not doing anything to fix it. So I made a list. This is a very integrator thing to do, is I made a list of all the things he complained about and a list of how I'd fix it if I were him. And I took him for coffee and I presented it to him. And at the end of the coffee, he said, you're promoted. You're my integrator. But I didn't know what an integrator was. I said, so what's that? And he said, well, here, read this book, Traction, which I have right here. So in case.
I've got one line here too.
And this is the original one that's pretty worn out. And so I read it. Yeah, I read it and I fell in love. I'm like, wow, this is awesome. We needed this at the church. We need it here. And when I read about integrator, I'm like, yeah, I'm kind of doing that already. So let's make it official and give me more authority over the whole organization. And so that's what we did. And I just started self-implementing what I read in the book, whatever made the most sense for what we were trying to accomplish. And we 22 times our net profit in 12 months. No turnover, no increase in revenue. It was just purely increased accountability engagement from the team. And I've just fell in love with EOS. And being an integrator.
Well, we got Dean here. I don't know if you know Dean, but I think he's talking about you here. Total rock star.
Studmeister.
And he said, if we only had a handbook, yeah, a guide for church groups to follow. I think everybody, every group that says that more than not. That's for sure. Because I've been in other kinds of organizations, for profit, not for profit. It's all the same. I mean, I think, and I've talked to a number of EOS integrators, and it's interesting how many of them have used them in not for profit or church groups,
Yeah.
and because the issues are the same.
Yeah, and that's what someone said to me. Is I remember when I was working at the construction company, they're like, "How do you go from being a pastor to being production manager at a construction company?" I said, "Well, they both have people, right? The context is different, but it's not really. It's the same. I would say there's very little difference, in fact, and that's why when people ask me, like, if like they're looking for a fractional integrator, sometimes they'll say, "Well, what's your background? What industries have you worked in?" Well, that's really not that important, to be honest, because it's people, right? And it's I'd say it's more important what size of company you've worked with, right? Have you experienced 20 people or 50 people or 100 people and the complexities that come with it? I'd say that's more important than the industry.
I concur with that 150%, because I don't care what business you're in. I mean, if you're in a business and it's got a mission, or it's got goals, you have people that have to execute it, and there's going to be people that know technically how to do it, and you got to get the right people in the right spots and help them do it.
Yeah. And I would say, to be honest, I would say it's actually kind of a blessing in disguise if you don't know the industry. And the reason is, then you can't get pulled into the weeds, right? Like they can't rely on you to do the details and actually do the work. It forces you to stay working on the business rather than in it. So, I found that with the construction company I was first integrated, because I'd only been in construction for 3 years, right? And there's people on the team that have been in construction for 20 and 25, right? And so they wouldn't come to me to ask me questions about construction, right? Because I wasn't the guy. They'd go to the visionary for that, right? But if they needed to come to somebody to talk about people and how to manage people and how to deal with certain situations, they'd come to me, because I was the expert on that, right?
Yeah.
So it was good.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's such a great beginning for you to actually have to live through that, go through the process, see it, how, first of all, the 7 years of not having the foundational things that EOS or the traction really teaches us, and then being able to go into a company that doesn't have it and then implement it, because it's a huge thing. So when you were implementing that first time, you were reading, you were implementing, what were some of the things that really surprised you?
About the system, or about how the implementation
About
rolled out?
about the system, first of all, and how it worked in the company.
I don't know that anything surprised me. To be honest, the interesting thing about when I first read Traction was, I hadn't heard any of it before. I had none of it was new, right? Like,
yes,
I'd read a lot of books, read a lot of books about leadership, read a lot of things, been to a lot of courses. I wasn't a new leader, right? So when I read Traction, it was like, wow, like they've just taken all the best stuff from everywhere and made it into something that was really that really made a lot of sense. It was simple, right?
Yeah.
So I don't know. Like, I think for a natural integrator, they just salivate when they read Traction, because it's like, wow, this is going to change the world, right?
Yeah.
So I don't know that, I'd say that the results and the speed of the improvement surprised me. But I had no doubt when I read it that it would make a big difference. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. It makes a lot of sense. And Dean's got a question here. He says, "What is EOS?" And basically, it's the entrepreneurial operating system that Gino Wickman talks about in the book Traction, and then he also has a couple other additional books that he talks about. But this has really got the framework of the EOS system, and what it really does, like you said, that I think is so helpful for people, Clayton, is that it lays it out in simple steps. How do I get my business organized? And
Mhm.
in steps that I don't have to be a specialist in anything other than I'm going to try to do what this says and organize it the way it is. Because the book itself, and this is, I'm going to be real honest, I poo-pooed the book for a long time because I'm older than the book, right? And I'm with, when you talk about the Collins and the other management people, and you talk about them that were laying out some of these foundational things, and of course they've taken it in different ways in Traction and put it together a little differently. But I thought this is the same stuff we're doing in companies already. But what I've come to really appreciate about the EOS implementers and integrators and the whole Traction movement is that it simplifies it to a point that you and I can have a conversation about how we want to move the business forward. And if we've agreed that we're going to use the principles laid out in Traction and EOS, we know what we're going to do.
Mm-hmm.
It's this different
Yeah.
steps, and we know what we're going to do.
Yeah.
The framework is there.
There's no disagreeing about the way we're going to do it if we agree we're going to do this. Right.
Yeah.
So it just unifies everybody. And if there's a disagreement, you can go back to the book. Right. And, being a Christian, I would say this, if you're married and you're both Christians, if there's a disagreement, you go back to the Bible. Right.
Yeah.
And you solve the disagreement. Right. So it gives you that common ground to unify you.
Yeah.
Really,
and I really enjoy when you have a visionary that really understands, and let's talk about this a little bit, the construction company in specific. When a visionary begins to realize their role as a visionary and how they think and how it's different from others, and they embrace it and really take off when the visionary and the integrator work together.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So when he promoted me, I didn't tell the whole story. His words were, "Clayton, when I touch operations, it blows up in my face every time." Right. And he said, "I saw you work at the church for 7 years and now 3 years with us. I know you'll be good at this. I know you'll be way better than me at this." And he let go. Right. He just, and I think, because of our length of relationship and depth of trust, it's not normal. It's not normal for a visionary to let go the way that he did. Like literally, he let go and let me run the company. And he was down to 4 to 6 hours a week at one point, fairly quickly. Because he knew I would handle it, and I would handle it better than him. And I thrived, right? It's like, this is my sweet spot. This is my unique ability. I love this, right? Like, I'm nerding out doing this stuff. Like, I just love it. And for him, he's like, oh, freedom. I don't have to do operations anymore, right? He'd been doing it for 15 years, and hating it, right? So now he's like, okay, now I can be an entrepreneur. Now I can go and I can, focus on business development. And he bought 2 other companies that year, and went and chased something else. He bought another residential construction company that was virtually bankrupt, and he turned it around. He's brilliant. He is brilliant at that stuff. But once it's running, he's bored. Yes. Right? Like, now I need a new challenge. Give me something else to do. This is boring. So can you run this for me so I can go chase the next opportunity? And I just had dinner with him last Thursday, and now he owns 4 companies. And at one point he had 7, but 3 went bankrupt. They were all fitness studios that he launched just before COVID. So that's not really his fault.
Yeah.
Bad timing. But he loves that. Like, he's thriving. He's loving that. Right. But he, it's just, that's his unique ability. Whereas mine was to run stuff.
Yeah. Well, and
Mhm.
you describe the way that like them, when they really understand getting the right people, the additional people on their team, that allow how that allows them to really flourish in their world and allows the other members of the team to really flourish. And when they see that, it's almost it's that thing for him, I'm sure, is very satisfying because he sees he's really being able to build things now for the
Mhm.
long term.
Yeah. Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the the unity guide. Now you like to help these visionaries and integrators work together. Where did the idea for that come from? That you know that it was something that people actually needed.
Well, it started with an implementer, an EOS implementer here in Alberta that I met, and we were having coffee or breakfast one day, and he said, somehow it came up, and he said, Clayton, if you can solve this problem, because it's a big problem, you'd be golden, right? And that kind of planted a seed and got me thinking, okay, how, could I solve this problem? And then I started talking about it more in my business. One of the guys in my BNI chapter, I used to be in BNI, I'm not anymore, if you're familiar. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
I was chatting with him about the visionary and integrator, and he's like, his eyes opened, and he's like, "Oh yeah, I'm the visionary." And I'm like, "Yeah, I know." Right? Like,
Yeah,
it's
I
pretty
caught you
obvious.
a mile away.
Yeah, you could spot him a mile away for sure.
Yeah.
And he said, and I just hired my girlfriend, and she's my integrator. And I said, "Okay, how's it going?" He's like, "If you don't help us, we're gonna kill each other." This is where this started. And I was like, "What do you mean?" And he explained it, and I'm like, "Okay, well," he's like, "Can you help us?" And I'm like, "Well, I don't have a program for that." And he's like, "Make one." And I was like, "Oh, okay, okay." So I made one,
Yeah.
and it was just a 5-week program. And the first session was 1 hour a week. The first session, they had a big fight. Like it got really heated, and they're yelling at each other. And I was like, "Whoa, whoa, 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 whoa! Stop! Time out! Time out! Time out!" And they stopped, and I was like, "Hey, this is what I see. You visionary, you have expectations up here for your integrator, but your communication to them is down here, right? She has no idea what she's doing. You've given her no structure, and she's floundering, and you're
Yeah.
mad at her because she's not delivering." And I said, like, you need to be more clear about what you want, and help her to give her some structure on how to get there, because integrators thrive in structure and they wilt outside of it. And he was mad at me, to be honest, because I put the blame on him, right?
Yeah.
he
Yeah.
he was not impressed. And I had a co-facilitator in there too, and they left the call, and he said to me, Clayton, I don't know if we can help these guys. And I was like, well, let's just stay the course, complete the program. And the next week the visionary came back and he apologized. He said, you know what, I thought about what you said, and I trust you, Clayton, and you're right. So then we spent the next 4 weeks building the structure. They weren't running on EOS, just to be
Mm-hmm.
clear, right? But it still applies, right? Like it doesn't
Yeah.
seem to matter who I talk to about visionaries and integrators, whether they're a visionary or an integrator or just on the team. I've talked to many people who are just team members, and I explain what I do to them, and they're like, "Oh yeah, this person is the visionary and this person is the integrator." And yeah, there's lots of conflict and different points of view, right? So that's where it all got started. It was just like a cry for help from somebody that I knew. And even now, that was 2 years ago, every time I see her, she like gives me a big hug and she says, thank
Uh-huh.
you. They're still together. The business is doing great. We're going for coffee after Christmas or breakfast.
That's awesome.
So that was the first one. And then the second one was very different. It was a referral from an EOS implementer, and they were about 6 months into implementing EOS, and very different situation. The integrator was new. He'd never been in this kind of a role, and he was really not stepping into it and owning it the way that he needed to. And I met with the visionary, and the visionary said, I feel like I need to rip the Band-Aid off and release control, but I just don't trust him that he's ready for it yet. And so then I ended up doing the same program with them. This was
Mm-hmm.
around the same time. And they were great, but they just needed to talk about some things. They needed, to go a little deeper in their relationship. And by the end, they were totally, he had ripped the Band-Aid off. Chris was owning it, and the leadership team commented to the implementer, like, I don't know what happened, but it's different now. Like, Chris is owning it, and the visionaries let go, and yeah, it's so much better. So
That's awesome.
that's how it started, and that was 2 years ago. And now I've just 2 years I've been spending a lot of time just thinking about how can I best set them up for success. I've been building a framework. I'm starting to work on a book. I've been doing lots of webinars and trying to help change the way that they think and embrace each other.
Well, it is so different, right? It's so different in the business. And you see this, like you said, we're talking about traction and EOS a lot in this, but every business, if they are a certain size, or they've got employees, a few employees, and they're doing, it doesn't matter what it really is. There is a visionary and integrator, whether they realize it or not. One person is more the outgoing doing it. The other person is there making sure that they're, executing, making sure the trains run on time. And so what you're saying and how you're helping people is really universal in terms of, or if they're using EOS or not. It's really getting those two pieces of the business working together, right? Or better.
Yeah.
Or better.
Yeah. And if I was speaking to a visionary, if there's visionaries listening and thinking about this,
yeah,
like, stop trying to do stuff you're not good at. Like, just stop. Like, your life's going to be so much better, right? When you have an integrator can do the stuff that you're bad at, right? Like, we all think, I think, especially when you start a business, you think, well, no, I can do that, right? Like, it's not that hard, right? But it's not giving you energy, right? Like, it's not, you don't enjoy it, right? Like, imagine if all you had to do was the things that you enjoyed mostly. Like, you never get out of, you never get out of doing the things you don't enjoy. But what if you were spending 80% of the time doing the things that you're uniquely built to do? Right? Like, how much more would you enjoy your business? And not only that, but it's the same for the integrator, right? Like, the things you don't like, they love. And so it's win-win, right?
Yes.
And your business is going to operate much better and be more profitable with a good integrator running it, right? So
yes,
it's hard.
Yeah, oh yes, it is. Because you made the key point there, is that visionaries, yes, you can do those things, but they're not the things that you really want to be doing, or that you're the best at, or that bring you joy in your day, or things like that. And when you get the integrator doing those things and free to do those things and do those things in the best way possible and not interfere with how they're doing it, other than, hey, the outcome's good or not, that's what we're doing there. What you see is that the visionary is like, okay, now, and if they know where they're going, right now, I can go work on this other stuff that I've wanted to work on forever, but I didn't have the time because I was always over here, because I could do that stuff. Even though it doesn't make me happy, I could do that stuff. Well, now that's getting taken care of by someone that likes to do it. Now I can go off and, like the construction example that you talked about, well, that person was able to go off and buy more companies and do what they need to do. And how did that change their trajectory? By allowing them to move into their real special skill set and move that forward faster.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So when you're helping people going through the EOS process, going through the structure and helping people do this, what are some of the common things that you see as the visionary and integrator are setting there that they really start to realize?
I think the biggest problem is not accepting the differences. So I always use marriage examples. I've been married for 13 years, and we spent way too much energy the first 10 years trying to change each other.
Join the club.
and it doesn't work.
No.
You can't change someone. It's impossible. All it does is create bitterness and resentment and strife, right? And I find that this happens a lot with visionaries and integrators, is that,
Yes.
Rather than embrace the differences, they push against them and try to change each other. And it's a big mistake. It's a big mistake, because it's your differences, not your similarities, that make it work. So I'll give you an example. So I stopped working at that construction company. I was gone for about a year and a half, and he reached out to me. He saw that I was starting to coach integrators, and he reached out to me. He's like, "Hey, Clayton, I think I might have an integrator that could step into your role." He said, "We've really been missing you, and what you did, and could you coach him?" And I said, "Yeah, I could. Like, do you think he's the right guy for it?" And he said, "Well, I think so. My only problem is he's not visionary enough." And I started laughing, right? And I said, "What are you talking about?" Right? I said, "We didn't work well together because I was like you. We worked well together because we were different. I was different, right? You don't need another visionary. You need an integrator, right?" So it's not, I get it. Like, you have to have maybe a certain level of visionariness, but it's the opposite that you really need. And I think one of the problems that most companies have and owners have, I think, is that they have a tendency to hire people just like them, and then they end up frustrated because they're people like them are annoying them because they're doing the same things that they're doing, right? And you don't need that. You need the opposite, right? I met with somebody today for coffee, and they're thinking about hiring an integrator, and she was telling me about who they're thinking of hiring, and I'm like, I just hope they're not, like them, because they don't need that. They need somebody who's going to challenge them, who's going to push back, who's going to disagree, right? Like that's where the strength is, if you can do it respectfully, right?
Mhm.
And yeah, so that's, I think, the biggest thing is that just, and that's where I start, is awareness, right? Like, we need to really start talking about awareness. Like, what does this relationship look like? And what impact can it have on your company? Which I think the book Rocket Fuel is another book that EOS put out, is really good. But then I also like to talk about what are let's get aware of what the pitfalls are. Like, what are the things that are going to annoy you about each other, right? And
Oh, yeah.
I don't know if you're familiar with the Colby assessment. Are you?
Mhm. I've heard
Yeah,
of it, yes.
Colby assessment, scores you on 4 things, and I use that in my coaching, and because it gives you a score between 1 to 10 on each thing, and if so, I'll give you an example. One of the third one is called Quick Start, and what that measures is your risk aversion, right? So if you're a high score, you risk isn't an issue for you, right? Like, you're willing to just go for it and risk everything, and it doesn't scare you, right? But if you're low, you are risk averse. You don't like,
Mhm.
you don't like risk, and you want to do the research, you want to build a system, you want to do all the stuff to avoid the risk, right? So a visionary is typically high quick start. Like, risk isn't a big deal. They love to, to risk, right? Whereas an integrator is usually going to be low. They're going to be risk averse, right? So if my visionary is rated a 10 and I'm a 1, we're going to have conflict,
Yes.
right? It's like, whoa, whoa, whoa. The integrators would be, whoa, 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 slow down, slow down. We need to think about this. And he's like, what? You're a governor on me. Like, I can't break through. This is so amazing. We need to go. And they're going to fight about it, right? So if you're not aware of that, it's going to be worse, right? But if you're aware of it, then you can compensate for it. You can meet in the middle somewhere, right? And
Mhm.
it's a blessing for the visionary to have somebody help them think things through before they dive in.
Yes. 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 And Heather said this earlier about something. Thanks for being here, Heather, in the comments. She said this is so true when she was you were talking earlier about visionaries and integrators and causing strife with each other. And when you said something in here, this awareness, and you talk about risk aversion, and that visionaries aren't really that afraid of risk, and they'll take a risk that an integrator won't. One of the things that just happened to me about a week ago is I was talking to someone in a business situation. They're like visionary out of this world, right? And it was finally they called me to ask my opinion about something, and I was like, okay. Well, this is, you're asking somebody that's more towards the integrator side of it. I said, well, these are the things, and really, you shouldn't do it. And I realized, I said, but you're going to go ahead and do this, right? You're just calling me to see what's going on. Yes, I'm going to go do it anyway. And I think that when you talk about that, or you talked about that, and how it can really do that, I think some of the integrators and the visionaries need to know that, hey, when I talk to somebody like this, they will ask me some more questions, because to them it's pretty risky, but to me it's not. But in the end, if that integrator really knows that, hey, it's going to happen no matter what, we just need to make the best outcome of it possible. That's one of the things as an integrator, you can start to flex with that visionary and really choose your time, your battles, I should say, because there are some things working with a visionary, you're going to have to stop and say, listen, this could really be a life-changing thing if you're doing it and you don't want to do it. Yeah. But on the other end of it, it's like, hey, if you're willing to risk it, and it's, you're going to put $50 there and you don't care if it's gone tomorrow, well, let's just try to make sure it doesn't go so fast. Yeah.
A couple of things I'd like to say on that one, because one of the central things to EOS is that the integrator is supposed to be the tiebreaker.
Yes.
Right. So if, and I think the reason for that is integrators tend to see downstream implications of things much better than a visionary does. So I think, like, if there's a stalemate in the leadership team, the integrator is supposed to make the call.
Yeah.
In the end, to protect the organization. But then I have another story that I have to tell you that's really funny.
Oh, that'd be great.
I was meeting with an implementer recently, and he's an integrator, and he said, oh man, I had a great relationship with my visionary before I became an implementer. We had so much trust for each other. And he told me the story. He said he would come into my office and he would spout off like 15, 20 ideas that he thought were just amazing. And he said, I would say to him, those ideas all suck. Get out of my office. And I was like, what? You said that to him? And he's like, yeah. And he would just leave. And I'm like, wow, why could you do that? Because that's not normal, right? Like, most of the time, one of the challenges is usually the visionary is the owner and the integrator is an employee. Not always, but quite often. So there's an intimidation factor there where you wouldn't risk saying something like that to your visionary, because you probably lose your job. But I asked him, why could you do that? And he said, because if one of his ideas was good, I would say, stop the presses, everyone. We're implementing this now. Right. So there was just a high level of trust that he had that gift of discernment to be able to tell when something was actionable and not impacting negatively on the organization. So he said that, he had that high level of trust. But can you get to that level of trust? Yeah, but it takes time, right? It takes, getting to know each other, and probably some fights.
Yeah.
Right. Like I believe intimacy is on the other side of fighting. You know what I mean? Yeah.
Well, and two, when we talk about fighting, conflicts, whatever you want to call it, it's not like it's ugly. It's just, I mean, if you don't have the trust, you're just disagreeing with somebody, and you're just trying to understand it and really understand where their position is, until you go, oh yeah, I'm not seeing it right, or maybe I am seeing it right, and you're not seeing what I'm seeing. It's a good thing. It's a good thing. And I think that's a great example. It sounds extreme to somebody that didn't go through the process that had to take place before that. But when you said what you said at the end there, it's like, good idea, full force forward. Bad idea, throw it out the door quickly. That's, I mean, the visionary in that situation is charged to keep bringing those ideas. Don't stop. Keep bringing them, because the good ones are going to get used, and the bad ones, or the ones that probably don't work so good, they're going to get shelved, but keep bringing more. I think that's I mean, you really put that
Yeah.
that visionary into hyper mode and where you want them.
Yeah. But there's a deep level of trust. Like there has to be,
Yeah.
I guess I'd put it this way, like that willingness to be open to being wrong.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
that's where I think a lot of visionaries stall, is they're not willing to be open to being wrong. Right. Like there's a pride there, and really leveraging that, integrator. And don't get me wrong, it can be the other way around. I was a integrator. I would say, like, I wasn't an integrator the first time I was working with a visionary, but I was prideful about process and how important it was. And I was angry all the time because people weren't doing things the way I wanted them to do it. Right.
Yeah.
So it goes both ways, but it's really important, I think, to be open, and to just trust that we're going to fight this out until we get the best path. Right. But both of our perspectives are going to be shared, and we're going to agree in the end what the best thing is for the company and for each other.
And when you see that work together, it's a powerful thing.
It's beautiful.
It is. It is something when you get a visionary that says, hey, it would be cool if we did this. And the visionary or the integrator goes, that's a great idea. And you go back a month or two later and it's happening. And you're taking over a market, or like you said in the construction company, the profitability is starting to take off, or whatever. You've opened a new division. These kind of things can literally happen in a very short time frame when you get these people working together.
Yeah. I've experienced the beauty of it, and I've experienced the pain of it. Right. I've seen all the the potential here, and I would say, like, like there's a great example right here where I live. Chris Jones is an EOS implementer in Calgary, and his integrator is now an EOS implementer as well. And they have an incredible story of their journey, of learning how to be a VI duo together. And it's an incredible story. They had a fireside chat last summer that I was at, and it was hilarious because they're telling their stories, but also, amazing to see what's possible if you leverage both gifts together.
It really is. It really is. Yeah. So if there are people listening today, and could be a founder, could be a visionary if they've already identified themselves as that, and they are sitting there with this other person in their business that is the one that's supposed to be keeping the trains running on time, supposed to be doing things there. What's one bit of advice you could give them today?
I would say enter the danger. That's a term, EOS term, but whatever scares you, like an issue that you feel like, you need to bring up. Like, we all have blind spots, right? Mm-hmm. So if there's a blind spot in, your integrator or vice versa, right, that needs to be exposed, that's holding the company back, run towards it, like address it. Don't pretend like it's not there, because it is there and it's holding things up. And how to do that, I would say, is intent matters more than technique. So what I mean by that is, if your intention when you bring it up is to stop the other person from doing something that is a pain in your butt and is making your life hard, it's not going to go well. Right. But if your intention is to bring, to help them, like to see them grow and to see the company succeed, and your heart is really to care for them. Like, this is how I manage my teams. When I have a team, is like, if I'm going to correct somebody, I won't correct them until I can come at it with the right intent. Right. Like, meaning I'm going to correct you on this because I want you to be successful. I know it's going to hold you back from success in your career. And, so I care about you and I want you to win. Then I'll bring it up. Right. But if it's just like, you're annoying me, please stop doing that, I won't bring it up, because they'll sense the intent. Do you know what I mean? Like, they'll just see that
100%.
You're just annoyed by me, so you're calling me out because it's an annoyance to you, right? So it's so important that we correct people because we care about them and we care about the business. So yeah, don't run from healthy conflict, but make sure you have the right intent when you start the conversation.
That is so powerful. I mean, what you said there can change the way that any two people, right? Really, when you look at it, when you're in a business situation, it's so funny. It's so interesting that you said that, because I'm doing that with someone now that I'm coaching, and it's like I have to check myself, and I have to really step back and go, okay, I want them to succeed. I need them to feel that I want them to succeed. And then we talk about this, talk about what we, how we could do this better.
Yeah.
And it's so much different a conversation.
Yeah. It can't be a selfish motivation that you're doing it from. Otherwise, they get defensive and it's going to blow up in your face.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, good stuff, man. Well, Clayton, it's been so much fun. I can't believe we're at time. And it's great talking to you, because I think that the people listening here today, if you came in here later, go back to the beginning. And I mean, Clayton, you really went through some good examples of yourself going through the visionary integrator process, seeing how it works, learning about traction and EOS, and then some of the situations where you've been coaching these visionaries and integrators in companies and really helping them to work together better so they can improve their organization. But thanks so much for being here today, man.
Thanks for having me. It was fun.
Yeah. So if someone wants to get a hold of you, Clayton, what's the best way to get a hold of you?
I'm very active on LinkedIn. So if you reach out to me on LinkedIn, I'd interact with you. Or my website is theunityguide.com. And there's a link on there to book a 30-minute free call if somebody wants.
Good. And I'm going to click your display name on. So it's Clayton Stenson. You can see how to spell it there, everyone. And reach out to him if you want to talk about this, or go to his website, The Unity Guide, and learn more about his fractional work that he does and his coaching of visionaries and integrators. Thanks so much for being here today, Clayton.
Thanks for having me.
Yes. Well, everyone else, thanks for all of you that commented today. We've got Dean and Heather and Robbie. Thanks so much for being here today. And all of you that were listening and not commenting, we appreciate you being here. We will be back again next week. Yes, I believe I have something going next. We're getting close to Christmas, so I don't know my holiday schedule that I decided, because I decided about 4 months ago that. But we'll be back again. Clayton, hang out for a moment.